Across the Park podcast is proud to be sponsored by Globe Gas and Heating. For the best kitchen and bathroom renovations, boiler servicing and repair, and central and underfloor heating in the Northwest, head over to globecentralheating.com and quote Across the Park for a free quote.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Across the Park podcast. Well, I always say to my mates how privileged I am to do this podcast, and this is definitely one of them moments. Probably in fact, without doubt, my favourite striker when I was going with the first striker that I kind of looked up to as a kid and thought, I want to be that man. Unfortunately, for me, you had a similar physical profile to me, Tony, but the one and only Tony Cottee. How you doing, Tom?
How you doing, Judgy? Yeah, you're obviously 5'7.5", the same as me.
That's it, mate. Every other player I tend to look up to is always a lot bigger than me. I thought, there he is.
Absolutely. Join the club, mate.
Superb. Well, listen, Tony, as I said off air, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. And today we're going to get into more current matters. We've had the show with you previously, and again, we thank you for coming on again. For any of our viewers, you can catch that back on YouTube and on any of your favourite podcast app if you search for Tony Cottee on Across the Park podcast. But in this instance, Tony, we're gonna speak about current affairs. Obviously, being a former Everton player, former West Ham player, former Leicester player, all those teams right in the mix. I mean, just before we came
That's on, cheered me up, Judgy, already.
I know, sorry, mate.
3 of my teams in the bottom section.
Yeah, at least you're not responsible in this instance. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. But just before we come on, because we've had that international break, which we all love as domestic football fans, I had to refresh my memory on how close it is at the bottom and focusing on those 3 teams and in particular Everton. Everton on 26 points with 28 games played. Leicester, 27 games played, 25 points. West Ham, 26 games played, 24 points. So 2 points between those 3 teams. Before we go into Everton, which you obviously want to focus on Tony, out of the 3, who are your biggest concerns for at the moment and why?
I must admit I'm worried about. Listen, Judgy, I'm a West Ham boy. That's my team. I grew up as a West Ham fan, and you can't change the team that you supported as a kid.
Absolutely, mate.
Everton's my second team, and Leicester's my third team, and that will never change. It's always been that way. I'm worried about the Hammers. I think they've been very poor in the Premier League this year. Obviously doing well in Europe, still in the Conference League. It's been a bit of a distraction. But they've got some really tough games coming up. They've got to play 5 of the top 6, and a lot of the other games are against the relegation rivals. So it's going to be tough for them. But I do expect them. I think they've got enough to stay up. Leicester, same sort of thing. Got some good players. Had a really strange season. Now, they was terrible at the start, lost 6 on the trot. Looks like Brendan was going to leave and he hung on. And I don't quite know what to make of Leicester's season. But I expect them to stay up. And then, of course, we come on to our beloved Everton. And they've had a weird season as well. But I still expect Everton to stay up. There's 9, you mentioned the teams, my ex-3 teams, but there's 9 clubs involved in what's going to be a titanic struggle, I think, right up to the end of the season. And it's hard to call. It's really hard to call. I don't think anyone really could probably definitely call what 3 teams are going to go down. All I can say is I honestly believe that all 3 teams have got enough to stay up. And, is that good enough for all 3 clubs? Of course it's not. But when you're in a relegation fight, the priority is stay up and then you rebuild for next season. But I do expect all 3 to be in the Premier League next season.
Well, that's something of a relief for me for it to come from you, Tony. I mean, you've been in a couple of scraps down there yourself down the years. I'm right in saying you're fortunate enough to have not been relegated, aren't you? Maybe on the cusp, but you weren't actually relegated as a player.
Well, quite a few times. So very close to the win, Judgy. I've got to be honest. Probably most famously with the in last game of the season against Wimbledon. That was probably the nearest, that was pretty desperate times then.
Couldn't get any closer, could it?
No, it couldn't, no. But I probably had about 4 or 5, maybe 6 scraps in terms of relegation. And, I was lucky that I didn't get relegated, and I never had that feeling. So, I can't describe what it's like to be relegated. But obviously I could talk about being close to relegation, and it's not good. It's not good for the players. It's not good for the club. It's not good for the fans. And I can't come in here pretending anything other than Everton are in a relegation scrap, as we all know at the moment.
Of course, just one thing I want to touch on then, Tony, on that, because you've been there as a player, and you look at those teams from Palace, as you've just alluded to, all the way down. So Palace are in 12th on 27 points, and only 4 points separate them and bottom of the league, Southampton. One common denominator almost between all the teams is the change of manager, or, some of them have rolled the dice, some of them have stuck by. For instance, two of your former clubs have stuck by who I consider to be very good managers, Brendan Rodgers and David Moyes.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, the reputations for me speak to them for themselves. As a player, how important is the manager in that running?
Well, the manager's vital. You mentioned Brendan. Brendan, I'm a big fan of Brendan. A nice guy, good coach, good manager. Same for Moisey, exactly the same. Describe him in the same way. And I would add Sean Dyche as well. An ex-teammate of mine. When most people don't realise that I had 6 weeks right at the end of my career at Millwall, and I hardly played a game. But it was a squad that contained firstly Tim Cahill and secondly Sean Dyche. Oh. So Dyche is an ex-teammate of mine. But yeah, the question is, how important is the manager? The manager's vitally important, but there's only so much the manager can do. The main thing is to get the boys organised, make sure know what they're doing from set pieces, corners, etc. Get them motivated for the game. Make sure you're prepared for every single game. But when it comes to kickoff, it's you can have the best manager in the world sitting on the bench, but the players have got to perform. And I think ultimately, when you look at Everton's season, I was a big fan of Frank Lampard. I'm a big fan of Sean Dyche. But the players have to take responsibility at some stage. And, that we've already touched on the last Wimbledon game and 93, 94. And, Mike Walker, for me, wasn't a particularly good manager. And when it came to the game, players have to step up. And, we made our work of it. 2-0 down after 25 minutes wasn't good. But ultimately, the players did step up and we did stay up. They did it last season, the last game against Palace. The players stepped up. And, let's hope it doesn't get to that this season. But if it does, the manager, yes, he's very, very important. But the players have to take responsibility at some time or other.
Yeah, two really good points there. And two that I just want to touch on a little bit more. The first one is set pieces. I mean, that's been a notable difference since Sean Dyche has come in. Everton look a lot more organised at the back, as you'd expect. I guess I suppose that for the neutral fan, it goes with the territory for Sean Dyche. But certainly attacking wise, we've gone back to basics a little bit. And although some may feel that going back to basics at times it can be seen as a negative thing, from a set piece point of view, it's been essential. It's been essential for that team. I mean, for example, one thing he's done, and one thing it seems has been the instruction since he's come in, is keep the ball in the air, from corners. So hang it up to the back post. So the likes of Tarkowski and Keane, who's come in recently, they're thriving on that because they can see the ball for ages. They can read the flight, and invariably they're getting on the end of it. That's been a huge boost for us. How important again, and I go back to the joke of us being the smaller guys in there, but how important is it for your sides to be that organised from a set play point of view, defensive attack and attacking?
It's quite interesting, really, Judgy, because I went to the training ground. This would have been Everton training ground. It probably would have been October time. They played at home to Palace, and I went to the training ground on the Friday. And I had a great time. I obviously played with Frank, so I knew Frank well, and I had a nice chat with him. But one of his frustrations was that they wasn't getting the ball in the box quick enough. And whether a manager can come in and change instructions, I don't know. I haven't had the chance to speak to Dyche yet. I've not been to the training ground. I'm guessing that he's gone in and said, get the ball in the box. The one thing about modern day football, and we all love seeing good football. You don't, the bad old days of hoofing it down the pitch, the old style Wimbledon, just kick it anywhere aimlessly down the pitch. Those days are long gone. But there is still, I think, a clamour to get the ball in the box. And when you see players sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 passes, then the ball goes back to the player who had it in the first place, then he crosses it. That's no good for me as a centre forward because I've already made 4 runs in the box. If you've got players in there that can score, like Calvert-Lewin would be a prime example. You spoke about set pieces. If you've got Tarkowski, I don't know, you've got Michael Keane, whoever it might be playing and centre half, Connor Cottee, whatever. Get the ball in the air. Give them something to go at. It's, again, short corners drive me mad. They take a short corner, goes back to the player, and then he tries to cross it, and it gets deflected or blocked or whatever. And just, you only got one task. The ball's in the quadrant. Put the ball in the air, in the box. And I think that's what Sean Dyche would have done. As I say, I've not had a chance to speak to him yet. I will do, but I'm guessing he's gone back to basics, like you say. And football is a very simple game. It's not a tough game. A lot of things have changed in football over the last 20 years since I retired, and sort of certainly last 40 years since I started. But the basics are still there. Defend, create, score a goal. If you get a corner, put the ball in the box. If you've got a direct free kick, don't take a short free kick and concede possession. Just get the ball in a position where you can shoot. They're all basics, and I think that's what Dyche would have done. He would have gone in. He's fortunate from a point of view. He's got the England goalkeeper. He's got some good defensive players. Got some good wing backs as well. That's the starting point. You get it right defensively, then you look at what you've got to do in midfield. All right, maybe you need to have a bit more work ethic at the moment, but as you start to improve as a team, you can bring the creative players in. And then you need someone to score goals, which has been the biggest problem for Everton, as we know, scoring goals. But back to basics, I've got no problem with that. And it's worked. You've got to look at the results. What's he got? I wrote it down, 11 points out of 24. That's pretty decent return from Sean Dyche.
Yeah, absolutely. And just touching on your second point previously, where you spoke about the players stepping up, I think the simplicity has allowed them to step up. And what I mean by that is, I think the one thing to point out right now, because we are talking about Sean Dyche and talking about maybe how he's overhauled things, there's still a lot of respect from the Everton fans for what Frank Lampard did last year, without doubt. And also, I think there's a lot of sympathy. He's lost Calvert-Lewin for the large portion of the season. As you said, there was maybe frustrations around some of the form of some of the players. But going back to the players stepping up, I think some of them players, it seems, and it is always with the benefit of hindsight, that the system and the way of playing, which again are just words that are maybe overused, was a little bit complicated for some of them. Our players, whether that's right or wrong in terms of our recruitments, are fairly limited and basic in the way that they operate. Dwight McNeil being a classic example. He'd been brought in the summer for big money. That's not Dwight McNeil's fault, but I think it was almost expected from Frank Lampard because of the fee and because of the type of, he's coming as a winger. You're here to create. He was looking for him to kind of link up, to beat players, which he is capable of doing. But I think since Sean Dyche has come in, it's been, as you suggested, look, get the ball, Dwight. If you can't take him on, try and cross it. Even if there's not the space to cross it, hit it against your man, get a corner. Yeah. And that simplicity has allowed him to step up. He now gets it, and it's one touch, cross. And what's great about him, which I really have appreciated, is when he can't get the ball in the box, he invariably wins a corner. And for me, that's allowed him to step up and just show his strengths. And it's been so good to see.
Yeah, I think with any player, you should always play to their strengths. Don't ask Dwight McNeil to play as a left back, for example, or to spend most of the game defending. Of course, if you're playing Man City, you've got to help out. We all understand that. But, try and focus. The art of management is to focus on what a player's good at. It's the same with me. Like when I played up front, don't get me running back trying to defend and not trying to win headers. Like, that's not what I'm good at. Get that player, whoever it might be, get that player to do what they're good at. And I think that's, coming back to Dyche, I think that's what he will do. He will simplify things, and he will say to Dwight, look, I don't want you coming back. You come back and help out when you have to. But when you get the ball, your fault is to take your man on. Okay? Go down the line, try and cross it. If you cross it, it's the bloke on the shin, goes out the corner. Happy days. Up come the big boys. You've got a chance. A lot of goals are scored from set pieces, as we know. And it's not a new thing. That's always been the case. A lot of goals have always been scored from set pieces. So play to your strengths. And I think that's what Dyche will do. He will simplify it for the players. And I think we've seen progress since Frank left. I'm same as you, Judgy. I was gutted that Frank left. There's an argument that perhaps it was the right thing to do. Could he have been given a bit more time? I don't know. But Everton can't afford to get relegated. We know that. They're in that position with the new ground coming. You can't afford to go to the Championship. And sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And I think it's look forward now. Look to the present, look to the future. And Dyche's come in, and I said when Frank left the football club, if you want to stay in the Premier League, Sean Dyche is the best man for you to do that, because he understands what it's like to be in a relegation fight. He's done a great job at Burnley, and he will go into what is a fantastic football club, being able to work with, no disrespect to Burnley, slightly better players at Everton, and you've got that ability to try and change things around. But he's a good manager, Dyche. It is simple. All right, sometimes people say, well, it's 4-4-2, it's basic and all that sort of stuff. It is a basic game. You don't have to complicate it, and you have to play to your players' strengths. If that's your players' strengths, play to their strengths. And that's what I think he's done so far. So very positive signs, but it can all change, and there's always difficult games around the corner. And when you're in that relegation scenario, it's tough. It's tough mentally, it's tough physically. And you've got to go and go again. And if you get wallops, you get wallops at Arsenal, you lose 4-0, you've got to pick yourself up. You've got to go again. And that's where it's hard, and it's hard for the fans as well, because they're going, oh, God, we lost 4-0. And then you turn up the next game, the fans need a bit of inspiration as well. So I think it's a two-way thing. And I think what is in favour of Everton staying up is the fans and Goodison, because it's such an important part. We saw it last season. I'm sure we'll see it towards the end of this season, if it's required, where the fans will get behind the players or make it as difficult as they can for the opposing players in terms of the reception you get when you're getting off the bus, etc. All the stuff that went on last season, I'm sure that'll happen again. And that can give the Everton players a real advantage. So, work to the strengths of the manager, strengths of the players. And as I say, I think there's a real positive with the fans as well.
Yeah, that's a good shout on the fans, and this might sound like a strange thing to say, but I think the fact that the fans almost over 2 generations now have been through these relegation battles, and they understand the importance and the way to create that atmosphere. I think that's a factor as well. But just one more on the pitch question, Tony, before we move on to the off the field stuff, which unfortunately has been dominating a lot of the headlines. One conundrum we've had this season, which I've alluded to before, has been that forward position. We've lost Dominic Calvert-Lewin for large periods through injury, which it is what it is. And we brought in Neal Maupay, who is, to put it bluntly, has been a slightly divisive figure in terms of his presence on the pitch. But you obviously have a bit of empathy, and as assumed for Neal Maupay's position in terms of the way that he's been treated as a forward, playing up there on his own, very similar, physical profile to yourself. What I guess, because listen, there's been a lot of criticism of Neal Maupay. I don't have to say that, and his goal return would suggest that as well. But from a balance point of view, would you have sympathy for Neal Maupay? And if so, how would you use him if we were going to use him in the running?
Have I got sympathy? Yeah, of course I've got sympathy. Excuse me. You have to look at the whole picture. Has Neal played as well as he could? No. But has he had a sustained run in the team? Probably not. I think he's been in and out on the substitutes bench. And again, I can speak from experience. When all my best football played at Everton was when I had a run in the team. You get your 5 or 6 games under your belt. You start getting a few goals. You then go on a run of form. And football can be a lot easier because you get your confidence once the goals go in and you're on a run of form. But it does work the other way. And if you're on the subs bench or if you start the game, the manager takes you off. You're then trooping off the pitch thinking, oh, God, he thinks it's my fault again. And also the service as well, because a lot of it can be down to service. Are you getting the right service? And you then got to also look, can Neal Maupay play up front on his own? And it would probably be a little bit like asking me to play up front on my own, a small player. I'd like to think I could have done it because I look at certain players. I look at Aguero playing up front for Man City, but look at the talent Aguero had behind him. Is that the same as Everton? Yeah. Probably not. So it depends on your teammates, but it's a tough role. Playing up there on your own is people say, well, there's 3 up front. Well, I know you've got someone out right and someone out left, but they're playing against one player. You're playing against 2 players down the middle, 2 centre halves. You've got to hold the ball. You've got, bring others into play, and it's a really tough role to do. I'd like to have seen Maupay maybe play up front with DCL, whether that's feasible, whether that would work. I don't know whether he's going to get a chance. I don't know. But the problem is you have to score goals, and I don't know. You know more than me, Judgy, what his goal return is. I don't think it's very good since he arrived at the club, and that's what people could judge you on your goals. As a centre forward, you're judged on your goals. You could be the worst player in the world, but if you scored a goal and you win 1-0, who cares? You won 1-0. You've done your job, and that is really where, unfortunately, Neil's statistics don't back up what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to give him a little bit of leeway. Ultimately, we'll have to see what happens, but the centre forward position has been a big problem for Everton for quite a few years now. Yes, it looked like DCL was going to fill that gap, but he can't keep getting as injured as he has been. You know, he's missed too many games. When your centre forward's out for so many games, you then go and buy other players and you experiment, and that's not good either. You need your centre forward fit and playing every game.
Yeah, spot on, TC. It's 1 goal in 20 games, so you're right. It's pretty grim.
Yeah,
I guess the concern for most Evertonians is, you know a goal scorer when you see one, whether you're a tennis fan or you're a football expert, and I just don't feel that he's maybe got that goal scoring instinct. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't.
Yeah, but you have to get in the positions as well, Judge.
Yeah,
you've got to be in positions, and I never worried about missing chances, because if I'm missing chances, I know I'm in the right position. It's when you're not in the right position and you're not getting yourself those chances, that's when it becomes frustrating. And then you then got to look at yourself and say, is that me or is that the team? In other words, is the team not creating chances? If the team's not creating chances, then you can sort of, in a way, sort of excuse yourself. But if the team's creating chances and then you're not, if the ball flashes across the goal once, twice, 3 times, and you're not in the box to put it in there, then you've got to have a serious look at yourself.
Yeah, in fairness, that's what we've seen, and that's certainly the thing that frustrates me a lot, is that there have been times when the service has been there, and certainly there've been balls put into areas where you would expect a forward to be. But we'll move beyond that. There is a shred of positivity in that the last game at Chelsea away, Ellis Sims has come off the bench, young striker, similar profile to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, scored a cracking goal. He's that'll do him the world of good, won't it, going into the next few games?
It will do, yeah. I think I'm right in saying that he played at Anfield. I've been away on holiday, Judgy. So
he did. Yeah, he did.
We've had the international break, and you're trying to.
Yeah, I'll help you with that. So his debut, if you like, and it was his full league debut, because he'd been on loan at Blackpool and most recently at Sunderland. He was recalled from the Sunderland loan, having scored quite a few games, but scored quite a few goals, but a lot of them being off the bench. His first start was at Anfield, and as you can imagine, was a bit of a baptism of fire.
I really felt for him that night, because he didn't quite come off everything he tried. The layoffs and flick-ons, it didn't really work for him, and he was very, very isolated at times. And sometimes you can. It's tough, because you put a player like that in, and then you think, "Oh, that was a tough baptism." As will he be able to respond? But the only way you can respond is to score goals, and if he can score goals, then he might well give an option, or maybe even play the 2 of them up front. I don't know. That's one for Dyche, but you Everton as a football club, they need 3 or 4 decent centre forwards at the club. I think that was always the case. You go back to the 80s and look at the quality at the club. You look at even the 90s, there was always Big Dunk. There was always an abundance of centre forwards, and now I think with the sort of fashion of playing one up front, instead of having 4 centre forwards on the books, you almost have 3 centre forwards on the books. Which is all well and good, but of course, if 2 of those centre forwards are out of form and not playing very well, and the other one's injured, you've got a massive problem. So, I was pleased for Ellis Sims. I saw the goal. I didn't see the game live. I saw the goal that he scored. He took it really well, and that will give him real confidence going forward.
Absolutely. Just before our listeners and viewers give me a load of stick, I've got to obviously give a nod to Demarai Gray, who, as you alluded to there, is one of those wide players who's kind of stepped up at number 9 over the last few games, done particularly well, and he surprised me, to be honest. Just before we do move on to is there any examples in your career where you can think of a kind of a wide player where he's either filled in at number 9, or you kind of thought maybe they could have been that player? It's a strange one, isn't it, particularly in that system?
Well, it's a specialised position, as we all know, but when you look at, I've just off the top of my head, and I'm not experienced through my career, but as a West Ham fan, I've watched Mikel Antonio arrive as a right back at West Ham, then go to right wing, and then go to centre forward, and now he's the club's top Premier League goal scorer. So, you can create a centre forward, in other words, as in Demarai. He's still, for me, he's still quite a slight player. I've always been a big fan. I think he's always been a really, really good player. And, you know, I've felt over the last, I don't know how long he's been at the club now, probably a couple of years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I've always felt when he's played, he's always been one of Everton's better players. Whether he can play that centre forward role or even like the number 10 role, only time will tell. I personally prefer him out wide because I think he can do a lot of damage out there. It all comes back to DCL, doesn't it? You know, you get him fit, keep him in the team, and then you work everything around him.
Well, listen, thanks for that, Tony. I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts are. I know, admittedly, you know, slightly out of the picture, being where you are and stuff, but you know, you can't help but have missed the pressure on the board at Everton.
Yeah.
You know, Mashiri being the owner, but you know, most notably Bill Kenwright and Denise Barrett-Baxendale, the CEO. The smallest board in the Premier League, which is one thing to say. What's your take on the whole situation in terms of how it's panned out and I guess the performance of the Everton board?
Well, as you say, Judgy, I mean, I'm Southend on Sea, Essex. I'm 250 mile away, so I don't get all the up-to-date news and the gossip like what everyone would. If you're living on Merseyside, you get everything, you understand everything. So I'm not going to profess to know everything that's going on. I'm just looking in from the distance. I think since Mashiri took over, I think there's been a catalogue of errors and mistakes made. I think there's been too many managers. There's been far too much money spent on average players. A real waste of money. We've now got the situation, which I think happened while I was on holiday, where, you know, potentially Everton could be deducted points and there's going to be an inquiry into how much money they've spent. You know, selling Richarlison, all right. Did he want to go? I don't know, but you know, he was one of the best players last year. What, you know, you're selling, as soon as you start selling your best players, that's a recipe for disaster. It's a real difficult one because I can't condone if there has been sort of threats to the board. I can't condone that. No one can, you know, and it's sad when you see a director's box and, you know, the board aren't allowed to go to the game for security reasons. I find that sad. I do find that sad. Having said all that, you know, I understand the frustrations of the Evertonians because, you know, it's as a club, it's, if you'd have said to me, I mean, I left in 1994, as you know, and in 1995, unbelievably, they won the FA Cup. I missed out on winning the FA Cup. But if you'd have said to me in 1995, you know, Everton aren't going to win anything for 28 years, I would have looked at you and said, well, you're mad, because surely they will win something. You know, it might only be an FA Cup, but surely they're going to win something. So to go so long having not won anything, there's a real frustration, and there's a real generation of fans that have grown up that haven't seen any success, and that when you get that scenario, very similar at my club, West Ham, 43 years since they've won anything, you get frustration and you get anger, and you get it more quickly, and especially in the current media world of social media, etc. Look at us, we're talking on Zoom today. Like, we're not even sitting in the same room together. We're talking 250 mile away, nice and easy. But it is so quick for people to be judgmental and go online and say, oh, he's rubbish, and get them out and do this and do that. So everything instant. And it's all what people want. But I get it, and I understand the frustrations. But I do think that everyone's got to somehow come together at Everton. And whether that means a change of ownership, probably would be the right scenario. You know, change the owner, get someone in, all starts again. I mean, the stadium's going to be fantastic. Same thing as at West Ham. Do you want to leave the stadium? Of course not. No one in their right mind wants to leave Goodison Park. But do you want Everton to compete and be in the Champions League and be a bigger and better club than what they are now? Of course you do. So you have to progress, like what West Ham have done, like what Tottenham have done, like what Arsenal have done. You build those new stadiums and you create new memories. So there's a lot that's got to come together. But I think any sort of aggro, resentment, feelings like that, it doesn't help. And Everton have got 10 very, very important Premier League games left. And I do feel that everyone's got to muck in together. And I think the fans will, by the way. I've already said that. I know they will for the games. But the feelings for what's going on off the field, it's very, very concerning. And also the main point of concern will be if there is a points deduction. I mean, it's hard enough to stay in the Premier League as it is without a points deduction for next season.
Yeah, I think on that one, it seems as though, and I'm reliably told that the points deduction, because of the length of time it'll take to finalise the investigation, that will more than likely happen next season. But
Absolutely.
just to go back to your previous point, and obviously to help you with that, because I completely accept that it's difficult to get all that context from where you are. On there's a current campaign that's doing the rounds at the moment, and it's a campaign amongst multiple fan groups, and it's called the All Together Now campaign, and it's absolutely to back what you just said. And the notion is that we need to be together, we need to be behind the players and the team when they're on the pitch, and any protest should not take that away. Do you know what I mean? It should not take that support away, and that's absolutely what the
that's good to hear, Judgy. Yeah, and like I say, you can moan as much as you want off the field matters. Yeah. That's fine. When the game kicks off, then you don't moan about that, and you're not sack the ball 100%. And all that sort of stuff, because that doesn't help things. It doesn't help the players. No. If everyone loses their focus, and I don't think the Evertonians will. I think all the Evertonians realise how important it is to stay in the Premier League. They know how important the next 10 games are. They've got the experience of what happened last year, and they will all come together. And when the games kick off, there will be no issues and no problems. But off the field stuff, it needs to be sorted out. It's been going on too long. It's been a disappointing spell under the ownership of Mashiri. Listen, Bill Kenwright's a friend of mine, and I'm a big fan of Bill Kenwright. And ultimately, I think he's got the best interest of the club at heart. In fact, I know that is the case. But he's not the owner anymore. And the owner is the one that has to take the responsibility. And if you can't give the Evertonians what they want, then step aside and let someone else do it.
No, it's a very fair point, Tony, and I appreciate your honesty there in relation to Bill Kenwright as well. And I don't think, and this is me speaking, but I'm fairly sure that a lot of the fans are in the same boat. It's not a personal thing. It's the fact that the performance at board level is poor, and the same way that if the performance on the pitch is poor, players are taken out. Players are sold, managers are replaced. But there hasn't been that same level of diligence at board level. And I think that's what the fans are asking for. Look, changes should happen at all level when the performance.
I totally agree. And the board have to take responsibility. As I say, too much money wasted, too many managers. It doesn't help the players. It really doesn't help the players, and they have to take responsibility, and they have to start getting the decisions right. There's been too many bad decisions. Going forward, it has to change, and especially with the new stadium, you've got to change things around. Now, how that happens, I don't know. I think the club have been looking for investment for quite a while now, but it's not always easy to ask someone to give you £200 million and not have a say in what's going on at the football club, especially with what's been going on the last 7 years. Why would you do that? I don't think anyone's going to do that. So I'm sure there will be someone out there. And you like to think because you never know with the change of ownership. If you do change ownership, you never know. I mean, look at Liverpool as an example. I know we don't want to talk about the Reds, but you look at their ownership. There's been certain owners that weren't very good, and there's been certain owners that have been good, and that can happen. Look at Arsenal. The Arsenal fans don't like the current owners. Tottenham fans don't like their owners. West Ham fans don't like their owners. So you've got to be sometimes careful with what you wish for. Yeah. But I think in this particular case with Everton, I think there's no denying that a change would be good for the club from everyone's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, the stadium is without doubt a positive or a light at the end of the tunnel if we can stay in the league and if we can fend off the financial fair play accusations as well. But listen, TC, you give us plenty of time and I really appreciate it. One last thing before we go, you touched on your opinion that you don't believe that Everton, Leicester or West Ham will go down. Who are your three then? Who do you believe will actually drop?
I knew you was going to ask me that. I've written them down. Right?
Go on.
Southampton, Bournemouth and Forest. That's the three Forest. I've gone.
That'll hear Forest.
But who knows? I mean, Palace have been dreadful, haven't they? Changed their manager. Yeah. You look at the other teams in there.
What's your take on that? What's your take on that, TC? Because Patrick Vieira, for me, look, this time last year was being lauded as one of the best coaches, managers in the Premier League. He's established a young side, an exciting side. Look, they've hit a tough patch where they're not scoring goals, and that never helps. But do you think Roy Hodgson is at his age? Listen, Roy, outstanding manager in his day. Do you think he's the answer at this stage?
Yeah, see, Roy's a friend of mine, and
of course, and listen, all the respect in the world for Roy, and
been a great manager, but he's 75 years of age now. You know, and didn't quite work out at Watford for him. Does he need all that aggro? I don't know, but I do get frustrated. I think with, as I say, the current era of football, everything's too quick. You know, it's too instant and too quick. And I think, you know, with a manager like Patrick Vieira, you know, of course they're going for a bad spell. You know, the same with Frank Lampard. You know, we had the ball must have been like that with Frank. Do we get rid of him? Do we, you know? And it's very difficult, you know. But I don't know. Only time will tell. I mean, if Palace get relegated, then obviously it was an awful decision. But I personally like to see clubs stick with their managers when times get hard. West Ham have done it recently with Moisey. Leicester have done it with Brendan. We've already touched on that. And I think that as long as you can see this in the background, there's progress, and the players are with the manager, because that's the key to it. Because the players have to be with the manager. That, you know, that old saying, "Lost the dressing room," and all that rubbish and that. You know, you have to keep the players on board. And nowadays, it's not 16, 17 players like when I played. It's now 30 players, and you've got to manage 30 players, keep them on board. So I don't have any insight into Patrick Vieira. I was surprised that he got sacked, even though they've had a really poor time. But Palace need to get their act together. They're in a relegation fight. Everton have got to play them, of course, haven't they, at Sellers? You know, so that's going to be a big game. But it's rather exciting in many respects, because the relegation fight is going to be a fascinating battle. It's not exciting when you're a West Ham fan or an Everton fan or a Leicester fan.
And you've got so many friends in football as well. Like every club, you've got a connection to here.
I know, but I am confident, and I will sign off by saying, and I'll stick to my. You can come back to me at the end of the season. If all three get relegated, then please don't contact me, Judgy. I will not give up. They will go down. But,
neither will I. Mate, this podcast will disappear by then. I think.
I'm pretty confident that all three are staying.
Top man. Well, listen, before we go, and I just like to share this with our listeners and viewers. Tony, like all friends of our show, hasn't asked for a fee. So Tony, if you don't mind dropping us a line, letting us know which charity we can donate to, so at least we can get something.
I will do,
further positive out of it.
Thanks, mate.
But thanks again for coming on, Tony. Appreciate it, and enjoy your weekend.
Absolutely. Perhaps we can talk at the end of the season, Judgy, and I'm sure you're going to remind me of this interview, so we can talk at the end of the season and perhaps have a little reflection on things.
Yeah, and hopefully we can have a reflection, and we can both be in sunny climates as well, because that helps, doesn't it?
Sounds good to me. Thanks,
Top
mate.
Man. Cheers, Tom. Take care, mate. Thank you.